Unlike the cautionary tales of the past, the artists who failed, the ones who were blacklisted, or the ones the public simply outgrew, Harry Styles presents a much more complicated tragedy. He hasn't been locked out of the kingdom. He won the kingdom too completely, because at a certain level of success, fame stops behaving like a reward and starts behaving like infrastructure. To the world, he looks untouchable. He commands stadiums, fronts luxury heritage brands, and anchors prestige cinema. He has cultivated a fan base so breathtakingly large, it behaves less like a traditional audience and more like a global weather system. He is presented to us as the ultimate fantasy ending that every young, hungry artist is told to chase. Total fame, total reach, total creative freedom. But that freedom may be an illusion, because the larger the monument, the harder it is to move. What if Harry Styles is no longer being treated like a human being who makes music, but like a structural pillar that has to keep generating value for a massive ecosystem around him? A monument cannot call in sick. A monument cannot disappear for 2 years and come back smaller. A monument cannot wake up one morning and say, "Actually, I don't want this life anymore." That is the trap.
There are some things we should never forget.
Yeah, you're never going to be up here forever, so you better find something else that makes you happy. And for a really long time, I was terrified of what my life was if I wasn't up here doing music, like on a show, doing something.
And once you train your eyes to see it, the songs that once sounded like victory laps start sounding remarkably like distress signals. Not loud, messy ones, the kind buried inside polished choruses, beautiful melodies, and just enough aesthetic ambiguity to pass as art instead of a confession. Today, we're breaking down the psychology of the golden cage. We are going to explore how the image of absolute freedom actually hides one of the most elegant, heavily guarded prisons the modern music industry has ever built. We'll look at why mainstream success can become a loop you simply cannot step out of. Because the wildest part of the Harry Styles story may not be how high he climbed. It may be the staggering cost of the altitude. Chapter 1. The $617 million ecosystem. There is a lie built deep into the foundation of modern fame, and it sounds incredibly convincing. The lie is this: the higher you go, the freer you become. We assume more money equates to more options, and more power results in total independence. It sounds logical. It even sounds fair. But in the highest echelons of pop music, the exact opposite is often the reality. Once an artist becomes big enough, they cease to be judged solely as a creative entity. They transform into a global asset, a moving economy, a machine with payrolls, non-disclosure agreements, brand obligations, grueling touring commitments, licensing expectations, and a public image so meticulously maintained. It starts to feel less like a personality, and more like corporate architecture. At that stage, true freedom becomes dangerous. Unpredictability is bad for business, and Harry Styles is not just big, he is clean big. Unlike the reckless rock stars of the past, who could burn their images to the ground in a tabloid frenzy and rebuild them, the following year, Harry's stardom is positioned as premium. He is elegant, safe enough for conservative corporate boards, yet edgy enough to drive culture. He is emotional enough for die-hard fans, fashionable enough to be the face of Gucci, masculine and soft at the exact same time, familiar, yet entirely elusive. This kind of stardom is not a happy accident. It is engineered to cross demographics, borders, and industries. Consider the sheer gravity of his recent peak. His Love on Tour didn't just sell out arenas, it grossed over $617 million, making it one of the highest-grossing tours in the history of live music. He held a 15-night residency at Madison Square Garden, where they literally raised a banner to the rafters for him. While balancing that global stadium tour, he was simultaneously executing international press junkets for 2 major films, Don't Worry Darling and My Policeman, while also launching his own lifestyle brand, Pleasing. He doesn't simply occupy the spotlight. He anchors multiple, massive revenue narratives all at once,
According to a press release on Monday, Harry's tours raised and donated more than $6.5 million to charity. That money went to more than 24 organizations around the world. The show included 173 concert dates. 18 of those were at LA's Forum. 20 of those sold out Madison Square Garden shows here in New York, and an attendance record for Wembley Stadium.
And that is exactly why leaving becomes impossible. Stepping back doesn't just affect his personal career, it threatens a multi-million-dollar ecosystem. Fame stops asking, "What do you want to make next?" and starts demanding, "How do we preserve the monument?" Monuments aren't built to rest. They are built to stand forever. But what happens when the architect realizes the door's locked from the outside? The answer lies in how the modern industry builds its cages out of applause. Chapter 2. A cage built of applause. The brilliance of this trap is its aesthetic. It doesn't look brutal. There are no iron bars. There isn't some old-school villain locking the artist in a basement and stealing their masters. The modern golden cage is infinitely more sophisticated. It is constructed out of sold-out dates. It is forged from brand campaigns that are disguised as artistic evolution. It is built out of headlines declaring you an icon before you've even had a quiet moment to ask yourself if this life still belongs to you. On the surface, Harry embodies liberation. He wears exactly what he wants, challenging gender norms and breaking the internet with a single magazine cover. He moves fluidly. He seems entirely above the noise, revealing just enough to keep us fed, but saying relatively little. But sometimes, the cleanest, most flawless image is actually the most controlled. Not because every detail is manufactured, but because the image has become far too valuable to ever allow it to fracture. Everything inside this cage is so beautiful that the very idea of escaping it feels irrational to the outside world. Why would someone walk away from a stadium of 80,000 screaming people? Why would someone step off the very pedestal that others spend their entire lives trying to reach? Because a pedestal is still a place you can get stuck. And the higher that pedestal is raised, the lonelier the balance becomes. The public makes a fatal error. We mistake visibility for agency. We assume that if someone is everywhere, they must be in control of everything. But visibility can also be a demand. It can be a relentless schedule. It can be a role you are forced to keep performing simply because too many people have built their financial futures on you continuing to be that exact person. That's the tipping point where artistry mutates into maintenance. You are no longer creating, you are maintaining the image, maintaining the mystery, maintaining the machine. Beneath the soaring visuals and the gleaming aesthetic of Harry's career, there is a recurring ache, a deep tension between spectacle and distance. Like we are looking at a man who has mastered the art of glowing under immense pressure while quietly losing oxygen. And nowhere is this clearer than in his music, because artists at this level often tell the truth most clearly when they know they can't say it directly. Chapter 3. The Sound of Suspension. Let's look at the emotional bedrock of his solo catalog. Sign of the Times was a massive chart event, but it didn't connect with millions of people just because it was a big booming rock ballad. It connected because it captured a very specific, devastating mood. It felt like listening to someone trying to float above a disaster without ever actually escaping it. The production is grand and cinematic, but the emotional core is completely devoid of relaxation. It feels suspended, like someone staring down at the world from a staggering height that they didn't necessarily ask for, trying to make peace with the terrifying realization that there is no gentle landing available to them. It doesn't sound like pure freedom. It sounds like vast, unbridgeable distance. It is the sound of being lifted so high above the fabric of ordinary human life that even your own emotions begin to arrive in slow motion. This is the central paradox of Harry's career. The larger the production became, the more his songs began to carry a strange, delicate fragility beneath the high-gloss pop sheen. It's never a messy melodrama. It's never a public collapse. It is just the faint, beautiful outline of a human being deeply overwhelmed by the towering architecture around him. He is sold to us as completely effortless, yet so much of his emotional energy feels like monumental effort converted into elegance. Even when the melodies are beautiful, the beauty feels inherently defensive, like the pain had to be polished to a high shine just to make it socially acceptable for mass consumption. That's not weakness, that is survival. When you are at Harry's level, you do not get the luxury of breaking down in public. You have to aestheticize the break. You turn disorientation into poetry, and alienation into atmosphere. And if Sign of the Times was the sound of floating above the collapse, his later work reveals something even heavier. Not the desire to escape, but the heartbreaking recognition of what was lost. Chapter 4. The Grief of Normalcy. There are songs designed to make us feel nostalgic, and then there are songs that sound like someone actively mourning a version of their life they are permanently locked out of. That is the devastating reality of As It Was. On paper and on the radio, it is bright, it is clean, it is an immediate hook-heavy pop triumph, but if you listen past the tempo emotionally, it does not play like a victory lap. It plays like a man standing inside a massive transformation that he knows he can never reverse. Look closely at the title. It is not a declaration of triumph. It doesn't say, "Look how far I've come," or "Watch me level up." It is a quiet, aching wound. As it was. As if the real tragedy is not that things have changed, but that the door back to normal life has been locked and dead-bolted. When you place this song beside the relentless machinery of the Harry Styles brand, it stops sounding like a catchy transitional anthem. It becomes the sound of someone staring dead in the face at the ultimate cost of becoming permanent. Megastardom freezes you in the public eye while privately dragging you through an endless cycle of forced reinventions. You are ordered to evolve, but only in ways the market can safely absorb. You must remain emotionally accessible to millions while remaining personally unreachable. You are forced to be intimate at scale. Think about how psychologically unnatural that is. To become one of the most recognizable men on the planet, heavily mythologized, constantly monetized, endlessly projected onto, and still somehow be expected to remember what a real room feels like when nobody in it needs anything from you.
I came home to my house in England, and I was home for about 5 days, and I walked in the door and I sat down, and I was like, I don't know what to do, like, when I'm home at all. I'd been away for so long, I hadn't seen my friends for so long, I didn't know who was around. I was kind of like, who do I hang out with?
What is this strange reality? Yeah.
That is the loneliness hidden inside the phenomenon. The heartbreak isn't that he changed. The heartbreak is that he no longer has the option not to. And when an artist loses the right to be ordinary, the machine quietly takes the wheel. Chapter 5. When the machine learns your face. The music industry does not just profit from hit songs, it profits from predictability. And from a corporate boardroom point of view, Harry Styles is predictability in its most highly evolved, elegant form. He can carry a 100-date world tour. He can carry a global fashion campaign. He carries the emotional projections of millions of people without cracking. He carries just enough softness to feel deeply human, and just enough distance to remain entirely aspirational. A figure like that is a once-in-a-generation asset, and when a system finds an asset that is impossible to replace, it does not loosen its grip, it optimizes around it. The schedules become more intense. The expectations move from seasonal to permanent. Every era must eclipse the last. Every public silence must be a calculated strategic move. Every single appearance must feed the architecture of the brand. At that point, the artist is no longer making art. He is servicing momentum. And momentum is a cruel master, because it always disguises itself as opportunity. Just do one more run, one more era, one more prestige film, One more campaign. Just proof that your last peak wasn't actually your peak. This is how the golden cage maintains its structural integrity. Not by forcing the artist to say no, but by making yes feel entirely inevitable. The person inside that loop begins to disappear in subtle ways. Not because they've left, but because they become buried beneath the suffocating layers of what their own success now requires them to be. Harry has been consumed as a symbol. He is no longer just Harry. He is what Harry means, and meanings are incredibly profitable. But the darkest part of this entire structure, the world still looks at him and calls it freedom. Chapter 6: The Performance of Choice. One of the most sophisticated tricks of modern celebrity culture is its ability to stage a person's confinement using the exact language of choice. Everything looks deliberate. The daring outfit looks chosen. The mysterious silence looks chosen. The geographical distance looks chosen. And sometimes it absolutely is. But choice inside a system is not the same thing as freedom from that system. That distinction is everything. Harry may have immense influence. He has incredible taste and real creative input in his projects. But none of that automatically dismantles the massive corporate structure surrounding him. A person can help pick out the wallpaper, design the furniture, and arrange the room and still find that the door is locked from the outside. Fans often want simple, easily digestible categories. They want him to be either a helpless victim or a calculating mastermind, entirely free or hopelessly trapped. Real life is much messier. The most believable reality is that he is both. He is both overwhelmingly powerful and intensely pressured, elevated to the heavens and deeply isolated, intensely grateful and profoundly exhausted.
There is no such thing as best in music. I don't think any of us sit in the studio making decisions based on what is going to get us one of these. This is really, really kind. I'm so, so grateful. I'm going to pass it over to my collaborators I'm just so, this doesn't happen to people like me very often, and this is so, so nice. Thank you very, very much.
He carries the immaculate private burden of staying luminous, the burden of being the cornerstone of everyone else's business plan. He is told over and over that he is the freest man in the world, while every practical daily consequence of his life dictates that shrinking is simply no longer allowed. What happens if he steps back too far? What happens if he releases an album that is purposely unpolished, unscalable, and deeply unfriendly to the market? The system doesn't need to actively punish him to enforce its rules. The crushing weight of expectation is punishment enough. Because mass culture claims it wants authenticity, but it only actually accepts authenticity when it arrives in a highly consumable shape. And Harry Styles has been molded into one of the most consumable shapes in pop history. Chapter 7: The Cost of a Monument. A human being is allowed to evolve, make mistakes, and change their mind. A monument has to remain perfectly legible. That is the razor-thin line Harry is walking. Once you are turned into a symbol, every move is overanalyzed. Every absence is treated as a clue. You are no longer just releasing music. You are feeding a mythology that has grown larger than your own private instincts. That mythology made him enormous, but it is the exact same force keeping him trapped in place. The cage is real, but because it is lined with luxury, prestige, and thunderous applause, the person inside has no socially acceptable way to complain about the lack of air. How do you explain suffocation from inside a dream? How do you confess to the world that the success they envy has become too large to inhabit? You whisper it through mood, through distance, through lyrics that sound simple until the loneliness underneath them bleeds through. Harry Styles represents the ultimate fantasy and the ultimate warning at the exact same time. He is what happens when the dream comes true too hard. So, if the door is open, why does nobody leave? Why do artists keep circling this machine after they've made the money and proven the point? Because the cage isn't always locked from the outside. Sometimes, it is held together by momentum. by expectation, and by the terrifying possibility that if you stop being the version of yourself the world endlessly rewards, you might actually have to meet the version of yourself underneath it. Harry's career is a masterpiece of containment, a high-gloss, beautifully lit system that hands an artist absolutely everything except the ability to ever become ordinary again. That is the trap. So I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Harry Styles is the freest artist in pop, or is he living inside an exquisitely designed trap? And if perfect success is a golden cage, what happens to the person who decides to break the lock? Click the video on your screen right now. Because if Harry stayed and became the monument, the next story is about the man who saw the machine closing in and chose to burn his place in it to the ground.
Certain people were doing certain things, certain people didn't want to sign contracts. So I knew something was happening. So I just got ahead of the curve. If I'm being honest with you, I was like, I'm just going to get out of here. I think this is done. And I just seen it. And I completely selfishly wanted to be the first person to go and make my own record.
We are looking at Zayn Malik and the devastating cost of being the first to escape. I'll see you there.